Hi, and welcome to The Content Engine. Last week, we had on Matthew Pollard, serial entrepreneur, speaker, author, and founder of the Rapid Growth Academy. We ended up having such a great in-depth conversation that we have split his episode into two parts. So last week, we chatted about how to craft your unified message and define your own market niche, as opposed to just competing on price or getting comparisons with your competitors. And in this week's episode, we're going to dive into how to leverage storytelling as part of your content, how to create your content in a way that's more evergreen, so it's more remixable, and how to craft your core blog posts or those main pillar articles that you can drive traffic to increase your lead generation. Really excited to be joining Matthew again this week. Let's get started. One of the first things that I noticed when I came to your first speech a couple years ago was your use of stories. And I think it was around a 20-minute presentation, and about 2/3 of it was stories, both your personal stories as well as clients that you've worked with. And it was a stark contrast to a lot of speakers that I hear that mostly tell facts and figures, or this is how to do something. And obviously, as a storyteller myself, I know the power of that and why it's so much more effective than just leading with facts and logic. So what is the power of weaving your message through storytelling as opposed to just laying out facts?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think the first one is that I started by lecturing and teaching people facts. And what's funny is when I stopped doing that and started telling people stories, people came to me more frequently and said, "Thank you for giving so much information. Most people don't give the amount of information that you do." Yet I gave less information. But here's what happens. See, first thing is people just need to understand stories. People retain 22 times as much information when embedded into a story as normal. So when you understand that, then it makes sense that anything you want people to get, you have to embed it into a story, because then even if you speak for 5 minutes, that's like a long time, right? So because somebody that gets in, they could lecture for an hour and not give as much information as I do. And when you think about that, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears is a perfect example, right? If I said, remember chairs, beds, and porridge, and I'm going to come back in a year and I'm going to ask you those 3 items, you're not going to remember those. So if I tell you about Goldilocks and the Three Bears, if I said, what are the 3 major items, you'll remember it instantly. So stories just work. But also it creates a natural resonance between the teller and the receiver of a story. So it creates instant rapport. But in truth, the reason why I did it is because I have a reading speed of a 6th grader. If I look at slides, I get overwhelmed because I feel like I'm going to miss something. With stories, I can do it nice and relaxed. I can go onto a video shoot and do 22 videos with not a cut or a mistake, because I'm telling a story as opposed to worrying about factual information, because in the story I can remember it. But I think that the most important thing that I found with story is that it allowed me to be authentic. Because when I could get up and tell a story of a person that had the outcome, I didn't feel like I was ever selling somebody from the stage. I didn't feel like I was overwhelming them with information. I just got up and shared a couple of stories. It's like what you do with your friends when you're out to dinner. People love stories. They love to hear them. I love to tell them. Everybody loves to tell and hear stories. So it just worked. And I found that it worked even better when I didn't lead with my own story, but if I led with somebody else's story. Because if you get up and you tell your own story, here you go, he's talking about himself again. But when I talk to a lot of people about, a Wendy or a Derek Lewis or an Alex Murphy and the change that they've had in their business, it just has such an impact. And it also does one thing that is hugely powerful. It embeds your value without you having to tell people about it. I just told Wendy's story. Now, of course, the story of Wendy is a great way to elucidate for everybody exactly why unified messages are important. But it also explained to people the process of working with me. I got to talk about the fact that I consult. I get to talk about the fact that there's a stepping stone process that I follow. And I also got to embed the fact that she got a really valuable outcome. I mean, if Wendy started with sales, she would have lost. And that was the moral of the story. But I got to embed all of these things along the way. And that's the real power of story.
Something else that I notice about great storytellers and really great teachers in general is that you can teach people as many tactics and how-tos as possible. But if you don't have a shift in belief, a shift in mindset, it doesn't matter how many facts you get, you're never going to take action. And that's something else I've noticed about your presentations is that you can see people's belief patterns shifting because you make it personal. They feel that they can do it too. And so it makes them want to take that action, to take that next step in working with you or learning more about you. And so that's a really powerful impact that stories can have.
Well, definitely. I mean, people buy emotionally. We know that. And stories make things tangible for people. So one of the skills that I teach people when they're learning how to sell is if somebody gives you an objection, there's two ways of handling an objection. One is, well, you should always use an objection handling cushion. I perfectly understand. The last thing I want to do is waste any of your time. Because you want to say, what you've said, I've taken on, and that's important to me, what you've just said, and I've listened, I've heard you. And I don't want to waste any of your time because I value it. But then you've got two options. You can lead in with, here are the logical reasons for why that may not be true. Or, I actually had a client that had a very similar objection, actually in your industry. And the reason why he said he didn't want to work with us was because of this specific reason. What I explained to him was, and you then go into a story for what you would normally tell them as what your logical objection would be. But now I'm not telling you, so your logical brain's not engaged. Your emotional brain is going, oh, story time. It's listening, right? So you're listening right through that story for the moral. So you're taking in, here's what I said to that person, and then here is the outcome that person had. And he is so glad that he took the, he trusted me enough to move forward. So I completely get, now we're coming into you, now I completely get why you may have that concern. But John, the reason why he did this is because he was looking for exactly what you're looking for. So while I completely understand that it may be a concern, what I would suggest is I would love it if you would trust me the same way he did, because I know I can get you the same outcome. Right? Now that story, there's nothing you can disagree with. You can't say, I don't believe John's story, because it happened to John, where you can quite easily say, I don't believe that will work in my business. But I didn't hit you with the logical factors, I just hit you with the emotional ones, which means your logical brain is short-circuited for that entire period. And then when you hear the moral, we're all programmed to when we hear a moral, we go with whatever the moral suggests.
And in terms of storytelling, it's not just about those sales situations, it's also around content marketing. And one of the main areas of content, specifically video, that I know that you invest in because we've worked together on it, is creating testimonials and case studies. And that's actually how we started working together, is you came to me and wanted to create a series of 30 testimonial videos. And at first I was like, wow, that's a lot of videos. And then we talked through the strategy and we started working on the narratives of why we want to create all these different stories, all these different testimonials for each niche and each industry. So can you walk through your thought process for generating so many testimonials and how you have gotten in the habit of continually picking up that social proof over time?
Yeah, so I think one of the lessons I learned a long time ago was that I didn't collect testimonials from people. I didn't need them. I was a great salesperson and I had a strong message, so I didn't collect them. And I was always doing face-to-face one-on-one selling, so I was good enough in the room at telling those stories. When I decided to go online, I went, well, firstly, I need a strong narrative behind every testimonial. I need them all to have a specific message. One to say I'm a really good speaker, one to say I'm a really good coach, one to say my academy delivers results. And I need those stories to sell for me because I'm not going to be in the room. So I can't, I always say if I can be in the room with somebody, they're going to sign up because it just doesn't happen any other way. And it's because I've practiced those skill sets. But when you're not in the room, they can just shut the window. Now, if I say, here are all the reasons why my course is going to work or why working with me one-on-one is going to work on a video, again, logical mind. They can choose whether to believe that or not. If somebody is telling their own personal story about their journey, well, that's a whole different story. And then if they start to embed, which you were amazing at, how their life was different and how the sky looked different and how they felt like that pressure come off their chest, the physical elements that make it more tangible for the people that feel like they had, they had the weight of the world on their chest because they felt like they were in this endless hamster wheel, or they felt like finally they were in the business that they loved, everything changed. Those are things you can use forever. I mean, that's something I had to pay for once. And every time somebody that comes to me from that industry or any industry like that asks me the question, hey, have you worked with anyone from my industry? I tell them that story, and then if they want to think about it, I send them the testimonial. They'll call me back in 2 or 3 days. It pays itself back in droves. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't think about, right? People are always worried about the cost of something, and they always look at it as a cost center. It's a profit center, because you should be able to leverage this stuff forever. Like, I think I've created in the last 18 months. And what's funny is I've created, and you always say, why haven't I released more videos? Because I've been creating the brand. I've created nearly 200 videos and so much content in the last 2 years. I haven't released it yet because I'm about to go through a full website rebrand, and then I've got this strategy about how I'm launching it out to the world. But I've leveraged, I think, 12 blog posts and 25 podcast episodes to create a global 6-figure brand where I was written up recently by Forbes as the real deal. 12 blog posts and 25 episodes. Most people think they have to do huge amounts of content. Mm-hmm. You can do so much with very little content. And the goal is get the system right first. Learn how to leverage the content you have and then bring in more content.
And having a very strategic plan on how you're inserting that content throughout the process. That's something you just mentioned about the testimonials. Is a lot of people make the mistake of saying, okay, I'm just going to slap up this testimonial on my YouTube channel, put it on a testimonials page. But they're not thinking through all the ways that they can repurpose that content, the way they can use it in their sales cycle, in emails, in follow-ups. And that's something that you do very, very well. And so one of the, speaking about how you've achieved such great marketing success from such a limited scope of content, you have this concept around your manifesto article. I believe that's what it's called. Correct?
Yeah, I call it my core blog post.
Core blog post. And this is a post that really outlines your core essence, your unified message, and how you work with clients. So how do you leverage this core blog post to generate so many leads for your business?
Definitely. So when people create content without strategy, they end up writing about their dog or the postman that didn't give them great customer service, because they're trying to figure out what to write. And for me, I always felt that what you should always imagine your content to have a backbone, right? Because it all has to come back to a central place, because you've got to think, what's the outcome I want them to give me? What's the outcome I want? Well, I want them to give me their email address. That's the purpose of any website. Any person that thinks that they just list their products and services on their website and that's going to help them, not anymore. These days it's about giving value first. So what I decided is I want people to know I'm the rapid growth guy, and I want people to know that I do these 3 things: differentiation, niche marketing, and sales systemization. Now, sure, I do a lot more like a lot of other people do. I call that my tip of the sword offering. That's just, people can only focus on 3 principles. Anything more than that, it's overcomplicated. So I said, well, what are the 3 major problems? So first, you've got to understand your niche market, understand what you're passionate about, and you're like, okay, so what is the 3 major problems that I'm solving? And then what you do is you create a blog post, just one blog post, which is, here is the problem, here is the solution, here is the story of a person that had that problem, that obtained the solution. Simple, right? Then just do it 3 times. Once you've done that, then perfect it into 1,500 words, right? So each one is, with an intro and a closing, is about 400 words each. And once you've done that, and here's the cool thing, people are like, oh yeah, but I go networking and I do it through networking, or I sell it from stage. Well, this specific blog post, once you've created it once and you've articulated it so precisely on a page, your stories, you thought they were laser sharp before. They are razor sharp in networking. You grab that core blog post. I turned my core blog post into a keynote presentation that never fails to deliver half of the people of the room to come and speak to me afterwards. It just never happened, right? Because the core blog post allowed me to make it so laser sharp that my keynote presentation's killer. Now I share those stories in videos. I share them everywhere.
So it essentially becomes the spoke of the wheel that so much other content can revolve around that core idea.
Well, here's the fun thing. When you're writing that article, you're going to have, I want to write this, but I've got to make it into this many words. I wish I could explain this. Well, that's a blog post, right? And then, so for me, when I was writing sales, I was like, in my head, there were 3 or 4 fears that people had when they try to get into sales that stop them from being successful. I call them the self-destructive mindsets. Well, I wrote myself a note as I was writing that, I want to write about this. So in my core blog post, I write about the fact that there are self-destructive mindsets, and then I link to that blog post. And then in the self-destructive mindsets, I talk about the fact that it's step 3 of the process, so don't start with sales because you've already lost, and it links back to the core blog post. So what I've created in my website is this incestuous series of articles that all come back to the one place.
So every road leads back to the blog post.
Because the point is that you want people to do one outcome. The whole thing about online marketing is not about getting them to buy on the day. Because that's like walking up to a girl. I mean, I think it was Ryan Dice that talks about this better than anyone that I've ever met. He spoke at Small Business Festival last year on our stage, and he said it, so I'm going to give him credit for it. It's like walking up at a bar to a girl and saying, how about we just go home? Sure, it might work from time to time, but it's not going to work a lot. But if you ask for their phone number, it's going to work more frequently. If you just offer to buy them a drink, maybe a little bit more. If you just have a casual conversation, even more. It's about making the easiest thing possible. And that's what it is, getting their email address. For me, my entire goal is getting them to read that core blog post. And then once I've given them a little bit of value, I want them to then give me their email address. And then I'm going to give them a lot more value and just ask them to perhaps watch a webinar or find out what their rapid growth archetype is, or maybe get on a call with me. And step by step, we develop a relationship where they've already received more value than I'll ever charge them for the first amount of working with me. That's the way you build a business these days.
Absolutely. And so when there's a company that has, so you mentioned for your unified message that, your core blog post, that you started off with just business coaches and then you expanded to service providers. And it's like this expanding circle. What about people that do have some distinct buckets, some distinct customer personas? There's lots of companies out there that will create specific lead magnets for each one of those personas. Now, would you define those as separate core blog posts depending on what that need is? Or do you feel like everything has to funnel back into this singular post?
So you can have a series of groups. So for me, I have the whys, the goals. In Better Business Coach, that one and Price Comes Last are 2 central topics that I talk about in my podcast. And when I go on other people's podcasts, like I created Better Business Coach was 25 episodes. It's had 80,000 downloads, right? In the first 12 months, it got 80,000 downloads just because I focused on creating great central content and then directing people to it. But that's what I consider one world. Then I moved it out to service providers and I created why businesses have to why businesses only have price to compete on. And that became the central blog post of rapid growth. Now I've got the book, The Introvert's Edge. So I'm creating the Introvert's Edge podcast, which will have one central post that's specifically designed to draw people to the next step. Now, what I always suggest people have is they have a primary and then silo focuses. So my primary focus is service providers. Then I have secondary focuses, which is business coaches, which are service providers but more tailored messaging, and then introverts. So what I always suggest when you're dealing with a corporation, you want to have an umbrella message that speaks to your core demographic and doesn't exclude other groups, but doesn't speak to them as highly. And you want to get that right first. What generally happens is people go, oh, we've got 10 buckets. So could we create 10 of these buckets?
They start creating the silo content first before.
No, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is you pick one, focus on that, and make that get you an ROI. And then use the ROI of that to spill out to the second, to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth, to the sixth. If you do all 10 at the same time, you're going to get persona dizzy. You just want to focus on, like for me, when I'm writing towards business coaches, my mum used to be a business coach and she struggled to get clients. So when I ran the Better Business Coach podcast, I was speaking to my mum. When I ran the Rapid Growth the Rapid Growth blog, I was writing to a guy called Alan. He's a guy that cleans slate in Victoria, Australia, and he's not really open-minded about new ideas, but he knows he needs something to change. So I almost use this persuasive writing kind of way of blogging because I'm almost trying to shock him into making some changes that I know he needs to make for him. In the Introvert's Edge, I'm writing to Alan as well because he's an introvert and I'm helping him understand that he can be a salesperson. But I know my personas really, really well. And even though Alan is 2 of them, I stay focused on rapid growth and then I transition and I stay focused on this. If you try and do them all at the same time, I'll have Alex Murphy call me about a video he's doing for Alan Wignall, the introvert, and then I'll have another person call me about the rapid growth, and I'll get confused in my personas. So you want to focus on one first, finish that, create a whole package worth of content that brings people back to this the backbone of your content. Then move to the next one. But move to the next one once you're seeing the results, once you're seeing the opt-ins, because there might be something in the way you're creating the content that's not working. For me, the reason why I was comfortable creating so many videos and so much content is I know that what I'm already doing is delivering an ROI. So what I'm doing is creating more satellite content to do the exact same thing. For a lot of people, they haven't proven the model yet, so they should start with one.
Excellent. And in your book, The Introvert's Edge, you tell a number of success stories of introverts who have learned how to market and sell much more effectively by leveraging processes as opposed to the gift of the gab. And as an introvert yourself, you fully embraced video as a medium that you leverage in order to market for your coach, for your course, for your consulting clients. And what advice do you have to introverts who are really nervous about being on camera? How can they apply those processes and those strategies that you coach them through in order to embrace this new storytelling medium?
Definitely. So I think the first thing that I think would be really helpful is don't do it for the first time on camera. So for me, every story that I tell on camera, I've told to someone else before. So I've either used it in a keynote presentation or I've used it with a client, just telling them the story to help them understand something, right? I'll always use a story externally first because I want to get practiced at telling it. I also want to validate that it has the impact that I'm looking for. Like if you go to a networking event and tell a story and it gets people really excited about working with you, put it on camera because you can leverage it forever after that. If it doesn't work, why spend the money on putting it on camera? Right? So a lot of people focus on, what am I going to say when I tell the story? Well, firstly, use the core blog post template, grab that element where you focus about the problem, the solution, and then the outcome, right? And a quick example would be go into detail about the problem from a rational and a feelings perspective, emotional perspective. Then the solution, I went in and I analyzed and I came up with this concept of fixing the problem, and then the solution from both a financial, an opportunity cost, and an emotional cost or return, if you like. And structure that and do it in less than 450 words, right? Focus on getting it that refined and focus on putting the information pretty evenly. So call it 150 words each element. And every time you're going to come up and do it on video, write it so that it becomes laser sharp. After you've written a few stories, you'll find that the stories then start to roll off your tongue and it becomes easy. Right? For me, when I first started with stories, I kind of felt like they were a little bit disjointed. And it's funny, I still go in to do something on video now, and I haven't done my homework of preparing the story beforehand. I might have told it to one person and that's about it. So I get a little bit nervous and then I come and it rolls off the tongue because I understand the 3 steps to telling a good story, and then adding, if you're doing content creation, what do you want them to do now? I.e. go to my blog post or opt into my website or just do something out in your life. Go outside, or like I tell people, spend 45 minutes on your marketing, right? Just something as simple as that. What outcome do you want? But for me, going through the process of doing video, I think the reason why I did it, well, the reason I did it is because as a person that learned how to sell as an introvert, I find any form of communication still exhausting. Now, what if I grew my business and I had to speak to 100 people a week? That's going to be horrifying for me, and I'm not going to be motivated about creating that type of business. So for me, I had to find another method. So I went to video, and what I realized is with video, if I tell the story once, for instance, this podcast is a great example. I've told you the Wendy story, but I haven't told you the Wendy story. I've told potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands of people over time the Wendy story. And those people over time, people that want that, may go and check out my rapid growth template, or they might go out and check out, the goal structure. And now I'm developing a relationship with them forever. I've got people that are reaching out to me because they heard me on a podcast 2 years ago and joined my mailing list system, and now it's the right time. Where if I went and spoke to you one-on-one, it's not the right time right now, oh, well, I guess we're done, right? It allows you to leverage yourself forever. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with people that come to video. They look for a return on investment right away. I created 30 testimonials with 30 people. You know, there was half of them I didn't use for like a year. But then I had a customer ask, and they were in the building industry, and they said, do you have anyone, like, you know, the building industry is a really hard group of people to speak in front of. Do you have anyone? They went, yeah, here's one. And he's like, and the testimonial goes like this. They were builders, hoarded around. These are proud people. That's the best sales pitch I could ever have. And it paid itself off with less than 5% of what I got from that. So the 30 testimonials that I got, one deal paid for all of them, right? People don't see it from that way. They see it as a cost, not as an expense to leverage to future profit. And that's the thing. So I think video is an absolute waste of time without a strategy. Video is an expensive mistake if you don't have a system. But if you do that, then it's a really good thing because it allows you to leverage yourself and get a return on investment. But you do have to learn how to evergreen your content because you don't want to be constantly posting this stuff. You know, don't just put the videos on YouTube and expect them to work for you. It doesn't work. And I think that's one of the other things that people need to look at. They need to look at social software that continually post video on all of their platforms so that people continually see their video. I mean, people that just put video on YouTube and hope it works, it's great collateral to give to people when you see a sales opportunity, but you really need to learn how to leverage it on social media if you want to monetize it elsewhere.
I love that. Yeah, and content is truly a snowball effect. It's something where you build it over time, and you may not see those incredible results in the first month or two, but it builds on itself. Like you mentioned, someone from a podcast episode that listened to you 2 years ago is now calling you. And I think people tend to take the transactional short-term approach instead of the long-term view of how it builds on itself.
There's a reason for that, Alex. Most people are focused on businesses that make money now. They're not building a business that they're passionate about. So they hope they're not having to still do this in 2 years' time.
Well, if it's something that you're passionate about, it's like, well, yeah, I'd love to do this for the next 10, 15 or more years. It's
exactly.
like, you're not, a lot of people don't take that longer view. And I guess if you're not passionate about it, then
don't get in front of a camera and talk about it.
Why are you doing it in the first? Unless it's just to merely create some cash flow and then move on to do something else. But
this is the thing. For short-term cash flow, nothing beats outbound sales. It just doesn't. Right? For me, like if I want to go out and get clients today, I'll go speak at an event. I'll make 5 figures by speaking at an event. I'm not talking, even if I went and spoke for free. The people in the room, if I told them 3 stories, I'd always make 5 figures in the room. Right? It doesn't really happen that I don't. But if I want to continually go and speak at events, again, as an introvert, that's exhausting.
And it's not scalable.
It's not scalable. Right now, sure, you could say, oh, but you could train people to speak or you could hire a sales team. I've done that. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to have 50 salespeople work for you? I do. Now, even if they've got the best system in the world, you have to keep reminding them to go back to the script and you've got to keep making sure that they're up to date with it. It's tiring. I have a virtual sales team that is online at all times that people can search. And I have a little automated tool that continually puts it on people's social medias so that the real people that got the results can sell for me for life. That's what video's for. If it's a short-term gain, video's not the right outcome. But if you're trying to create a long-term sustainable business and a rapid growth business, everyone talks about overnight success. There is no such thing. I mean, even a lot of music artists that are overnight successes took 3 years of bad songs or 10 years of bad songs to get there. The goal is that you need to create short-term income and long-term income. And the goal with video is to get the video to become the long-term income so you can stop worrying about short-term income. That's what video's for. If people come into it for any other reason, it's the wrong reason. Now, there are things you can do to be better at video. I mean, you and I have discussed about how when I am passionate about something, I get really serious and I get this thing in the forehead and I feel like it's like I'm selling to someone. It's not that I'm selling, I'm just really passionate about people stop working so hard. Business doesn't need to be that hard. But the problem is that people are in this endless hamster wheel. Because today I go out to a networking event, I don't even know how to sell, I don't know what my message is, so I then go out and I write a bunch of proposals, I then chase those people. I may get one client, most people don't even read them, and tomorrow my day looks exactly the same, and there's no end to that. So then I try video, I make one video or 5 videos, but I don't have a message, I don't have a niche, I don't have a sales system, so even by some magic thing that it works and somebody calls me, I don't even know how to close them, and then I say video doesn't work. Video doesn't work, social media doesn't work, sales training doesn't work, networking, nothing works. It's the step-by-step system that leads you to growth. And if people are considering video and they haven't done their homework before and the steps before, video won't work for them. That's why you spend so much time creating them and helping them understand the narrative.
Absolutely, and there's been people that have come to Golden Arm and wanted to create a video or a series of videos, and yet I've looked at their brand, I've looked at their messaging, and they don't have the foundation in place. And I've actually politely turned them away and told them to invest in these other areas. Now, we're getting into some of those areas now, which is exciting. But it's because I have their best interests at heart, and it's like, yeah, you can have this great video, but if you're growing a rose in the middle of a garbage dump, it's not really going to achieve that much success for you. And so yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, Matthew, that's all the time we have on the show for today. So where can people find more about you online?
Well, definitely. I think just type my name into Google. I think I take up most of the page. Or you can go to MatthewPollard.com or Matthew Pollard Speaker or Matthew Pollard in Facebook. So just type in my name pretty much anywhere and you'll find me. And you can also check out my podcast, The Better Business Coach podcast. You can check out my book, which is called The Introverts Edge. And check out my new podcast. It's coming out later on this year called The Introverts Edge. We've got some exciting guests and we're actually recording it in the studio. So people get a kick of seeing some of the new the coloring and the different colored walls.
All right, Matthew. Well, thank you so much, man.
Very happy to be here, mate. Thank you.
And thank you so much for viewing another episode of The Content Engine. This is a weekly show, so please remember to subscribe. And until next time, put your message in motion.